Good afternoon and welcome to week 4 of EDU 509. I just wrapped up correcting your assignment ones yesterday. Everything looked great work. Make sure you keep up the good work in the discussion boards too. There are several of you who have not been completing as many responses to your peers as I would like, so please remember that those are required. This last week, we looked at neuroscience, strategies and interventions, how to share those with your colleagues, and how can what we know about the brain impact institutional structures and policies as well as daily practice. This week, we're going to look at the 6 R's of educational practices: relational, relevant, repetitive, rewarding, rhythmic, and respectful. So you'll watch this video and respond on discussion board. You're going to read and review some website and articles plus a video in the discussion boards. You're going to complete 2 discussion boards. Make sure you respond to your peers. And assignment number 2 is due Saturday. So looking at the discussion boards, got number 1, you're going to watch this video and respond to these 5 questions and make sure you dialogue with your cohort colleagues. And for number 2, for the 6 R's, should be linked here. I'm sorry, it wasn't working earlier. There we go, it is working. It had decided it didn't want to work last week. Then select one of the remaining readings for this week and respond to these questions. Just 2 questions. And, sorry, 3 questions there. The formatting got funny. Dialogue with 2 cohort colleagues. You can always dialogue with more if you would like. Back to assignment 2. Turns out there was not a rubric in D2L, so I will be trying to get the rubrics like I used in your previous course up and ready for assignment 2, as I think that was well received. I can't promise I can get to it. The Department of Corrections has some pretty busy weeks going on with ADA work. And I am kind of central to that because I put myself in that place. So the time I would usually be using to do this has been going into overtime at work. So for assignment number 2, you're going to identify organizational systems, policies, and procedures in place that support the concept of being trauma-informed. This paper is to be written in 3rd person and include the following. As always, an introduction, addressing the questions, which are noted on the next slide, a conclusion, make sure your APA formatted cover page plus 2 to 3 pages of written content, headings, in-text citations, and reference page per APA guidelines. One thing that I noted in a couple papers is the use of citation generators not working great in D2L. So be very careful about that. The formatting comes over funny sometimes or it's highlighted funny. So if you are using some of those, make sure you double check after you submit because it doesn't look very good in D2L. And you may want to consider using it, but then replacing it with your own text afterwards. So using it to generate it, then replacing it with actually typing it. So the content is, how does the mission or vision of the organization guide their organization's response to student-client trauma? What resources are available to teachers, staff, faculty, and/or organizational leaders to recognize and respond to those impacted by traumatic stress? In what ways is your organization intentionally providing evidence-based interventions, and access to services for students affected by trauma? Identify any gaps in the organizational structure that might be potential barriers to being trauma responsive. If there are gaps in the system structure, what are recommendations do you suggest bridging them? What are your recommendations for fixing the gaps? One thing I want to note, if they are not doing this, please note how they aren't. And that will be in the gaps, but don't just skip a section because it's not being done. So if the mission or vision doesn't guide their response to student or client trauma, talk about that. Or maybe you work in a really trauma-informed place and there aren't gaps. Talk about that. Talk about the gaps or places where you see that There may have been gaps in the past that have been filled, or how they go about making sure there aren't gaps. So make sure you hit on all of these, even if your organization is either doing really, really bad or really, really good, and some of the questions don't seem to quite fit. You can email me about that, and I can give you some extra guidance. So what I would like you to talk about today is, what does your organization do to support you in this work? We've talked a lot about in previous classes self-care. So what does your organization do to help you when you are trauma impacted, when you have students who are showing signs of trauma, or maybe there's traumatic events in the classroom? I will say for the Department of Corrections, it's not usually a lot. They do offer, I should say there's nothing in the middle ground. Either it's nothing or it's a big system of bringing in supports for a major incident. So those medium level incidents, there's very little support. But if we have a big incident, they will offer a team from central office to come down, do some debriefing sessions, do some coaching on things that can be improved and ways to, cope with that stress. And then the minor incidents, there's nothing. And the medium ones where people may be more rattled, it's more of just a check-in and nothing past that. So I'm curious what your organizations do. Have a great week. I look forward to seeing your discussion boards, both for week 3 and week 4, and looking into those written assignments that you do for this one. Have a great week, and I hope everybody has a great Memorial Day weekend.